Aye.
Okay, can you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we've got some announcements, and then we have some presentations, but we're going to slightly change the order. After the announcements, we're going to appoint our new town clerk. That way her family is not forced to sit through an audit presentation. First announcement, this Saturday, still scheduled, is Slide the City in Pearl River on Central Avenue from 12 to 6. However, based on the thunderstorm forecast, there's a very good chance that's going to be pushed till early September. Keep an eye out on social media and on the normal distribution chains to find that out, so you don't show up in a bathing suit for downtown Pearl River for no reason. Tuesday, September 4th, we have the Police Department 2019 budget presentation at 7:00 p.m. during the regularly scheduled Police Commission meeting. Again, on Tuesday, September 4th, we're going to be starting the workshop meeting at 7:30 p.m. as opposed to 8:00 p.m. to accommodate the schedule of both a public hearing and the town board honoring Pearl River's Little League New York State 11 and under champions for softball 2018. They'll be getting some certificates from us, and congratulations to the girls there. Also, September 4th, we'll be having a public hearing for HNA Palisades Premier Conference Center, petition for a zone change from LO to OP. September 4th, the presentations by our special districts and libraries will occur from May 15 until 9 o'clock. That's our libraries in the South Orangetown area, because Pearl River is a school district library, and they get funded directly. The Blauville Fire Department, the South Orangetown Ambulance, the paramedics, and the Nyack Ambulance. Saturday, September 8th, we have the 2019 Town Department Budget Heads presentation. Town Department Heads budget presentations to the town board. That's a Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's a public meeting, but it is on a weekend to accommodate all of the different departments. On 9/11, we have our 17th anniversary 9/11 Remembrance Service beginning at 6:00 p.m. That will be at the monument on the town hall lawn as you're at the corner of Orangeburg Road there. Saturday, September 29th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. is the 21st annual Orangetown Police Department Open House. All are welcome. It's a great event for the kids, and there's some other departments and other agencies will be there as well. And on this Tuesday, August 14th, the town board, we're going to be reviewing meter placements in Pearl River of different types of zones. We would authorize a 30-minute zone in the past to be put in downtown Pearl River in different areas. So we're going to sort of invite the public. There's no public hearing formally on that, but if you have some ideas about downtown Pearl River and where specific types of meters should go, not physically moving them, it's changing what type of hours might be at one, please come in and offer your comments during that public comment period that day. That's a week from today on August 14th. So to deviate from the agenda where we have presentations and discussion items, we're going to go straight to our first resolution. We took interviews with several different folks, some very qualified candidates, and as you all know, our town clerk, Charlotte Madigan, retired as of last month. The interviews are great. There were Republicans interviewed, Democrats interviewed, independents interviewed. We invited the Democratic Party to, if they had anyone that they wanted to suggest as well. They didn't have anyone at the time that wanted to go for the interview, but there were people of all parties interviewed, and we are very proud to appoint to fill the vacancy through December 31st of this year, Rosanna Sfreja. She's an experienced small business owner. We think she's going to bring a lot of qualifications and great ideas to the town clerk position. So is there anyone who would like to offer a motion on the appointment of the town clerk to fill the vacancy?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Roseanne.
Okay, Councilman Valentine with the motion, a second from Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
I have to abstain. The Democratic Party will be running an election in November, but that's it.
Okay. And there's a few other positions that Rosanna will have to be appointed to that the clerk also fills. So we have a motion to appoint Rosanna Sfreja, our Records Access Officer, through December 31st of 2018. motion on that. Councilman Troy, second from Councilman Valentine. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Resolution to appoint Records Management Officer until December 31st.
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valentine with a motion, second from Councilman Divany. All in favor?
Aye.
And resolution to appoint Rosanna our Registrar of Vital Statistics. Is there a motion? Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
And to designate a marriage officer as Rosanna, moved by Councilman Divany, second from Councilman Batari with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Rob, does she have to take an oath?
She does, but
Yeah, for the marriage office.
for everything, yeah, for town clerk, if you want, actually, you would probably be the one to do it, because it's really the town clerk who does it.
This is a key component that we're missing here.
Joe,
You can do it now, or
Joe,
you can do it
can
tomorrow.
you swear oaths? Okay.
you can today.
You can now. Rosanna, would you like to step forward?
Deputy Town
Joe, can you
Clerk
step
gonna-
down? The deputy town clerk will swear in our town
new
clerk
town clerk.
officially, now that she's been appointed to everything.
You have a Bible? Or?
Is there a script?
You need a Bible? Look at that.
Yeah, any family members who would like to join Rosanna to be sworn in?
Uphold the Constitution,
Here it is, Joe.
uphold the
Aye.
Constitution,
State your name.
uphold the Constitution of the United States, the state of New York. Not off the top of my head, but I can whisper it to you. Okay.
Normally, there's a judge here, and this is all done as a group, and we're just told what to do.
And
So
discharge the
I
duties
apologize for not having it.
for the office of town clerk. Raise your right hand.
Rosanna and Nick, you are now married.
Yeah, do you stand? There we go. Yeah, here, everyone turn so you can get a photo. Everyone stand behind. There we go. All right, good.
Do you swear?
Do you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the state of New York,
To discharge the
to
duties?
discharge the duties of the town clerk,
I hope you got it.
and all the duties attached to the other offices?
I do.
And we would welcome and report to the town clerk of Orangetown.
Thank you.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, wait, so this is two partners.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Rosanna, did you want to say anything? Offer some thoughts? Step to the podium if you want. I mean,
I'd like to thank the town board for giving me this opportunity to interview for this position and to have confidence in me to take this duty seriously and with all my heart and hard work and experience. I want to thank my family for their support. And I will do all my best to do a good job.
All right.
great. Thank you. No, we're not going to make you take over or let you wait till 9 o'clock tomorrow to start your job there, so you don't have to step in. Do we want to offer a 2-minute recess for them to gather their things? Yeah, okay, so I move that we enter recess for a brief recess of 5 minutes to allow for some shuffling of personnel here. Is there a second? Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, great. brief recess. Is there a second? Okay. All right, folks, we're back in session. I'm just going to have to ask to get to a low murmur, if we could. Yeah, we're getting, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming in. We appreciate it. Yes, we should get to the public hearing first. Okay, given the time and the announced timing of the public hearing, it's going to take 2 seconds. It's 'cause we have no one to comment on it, I don't think. We have a motion to open the public hearing for Councilman Divney. Is there a second? Councilman Batari, all in favor? Aye. Okay, so first of all, before anyone comments, you should know that we have to continue this because it wasn't properly noticed, so it'll be continued until 7:35 on September 4th. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on the hearing for commercial building internal subdivisions changes to our code? Okay,
Move to
continue.
continue on the date.
September 4th, 7:35 PM from Councilman Divney. Second from Councilman Batari. All in favor? Aye. Okay, now we'll go back, and you guys finally get to present our audit presentation for fiscal year 2018 from O'Connor Davies. Go ahead.
Shall we sit here?
Wherever you like, it's fine, yeah. Yeah, we will need a microphone for you to talk. That's the microphone. You can move, you know what you can do? Take the microphone off and sit at that table.
I'll try this.
Because, I don't know, either way.
If it makes it over.
Thank you.
If it reaches, yeah. Okay, good. There we go.
Yeah, give it to the clerk. Mr. Supervisor, members of the town board, my name is Nicholas DeSantis. I'm a partner with the firm of O'Connor Davies, and to my left is Rob Danielle, a partner, and he was also the partner in charge of the audit here of the town of Orangetown for the year ended December 31st, 2017. I believe you have in front of you a spiral book, which is the actual comprehensive annual financial report. We've also given you a separate booklet, and I'll explain to you its purpose in a few minutes. If you happen to refer to the spiral book and you turn to Roman numeral page 10, you'll see that the town of Orangetown, in the spiral book, town of Orangetown has been awarded a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting by the Government Finance Officers Association, a national organization. And the town of Orangetown is fortunate and deserving to receive this award, and not many municipalities within the state of New York actually receive this award. And it's a significant accomplishment by your finance director and his team to put together the information to make the town continually eligible for this award. If we turn a couple of pages behind that certificate of achievement, you'll come to the independent auditor's report. This part of the financial report is something that my firm generates on behalf of you engaging, the town board engaging us to audit the financial statements of the town, its government activities, its business type activities, its component unit, and every major fund and the fund information of the town of Orangetown as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2017, and the accompanying notes to the financial statements. Those financial statements and the notes are collectively comprise what's known as the town's basic financial statements when you refer to the table of contents. You'll see the next paragraph there indicates management's responsibility insofar as preparing the financial statements and furnishing reliable data with which we can conduct an audit. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based upon the audit. We did not audit the financial statements of the Orangetown Housing Authority, a component unit, for the year ended December 31st. The next paragraph indicates what our responsibilities are in performing an audit, and that's to gather audit evidence and disclosures with which we can form an opinion on. And of course, the last sentence on that page says that we believe that the audit evidence that we obtained was sufficient and appropriate basis for us to issue an opinion. And if you turn the page, you'll see our opinion based upon our audit and the report of the other auditor and the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town of Orangetown. So this is what's known as a clean opinion. It indicates that the town has fairly presented the information, and others who read this financial statement can rely upon the financial statements to get a understanding of the town's financial condition. With that said, what Rob has done is he's put together that second pamphlet, and we've extracted some information in that pamphlet from the financial statements, so we can perhaps make this as a handout for you to understand the town's finances for the year ended December 31st, 2017. So with that said, Rob is going to take you through some of the numbers. Rob?
Thank you, Nick. All right, so I prepared a PowerPoint, and if you turn to page 3, Nick kind of described what the basic financial statements are and the opinion that we issue. So I'm going to skip over page 3. Page 4, Nick also described the elements of the comprehensive annual financial report. And there's a lot of statistical information included in the CAFR report, as we call it. So I'm going to go right into the numbers. If you turn to page 5 of the PowerPoint, page 5 is the 2007 budget to actual summary of the general fund, which is the main operating account of the town. There are 4 columns there, and the details can be found on page 74 of the basic financial statements. The first column is the original budget, and that's what the town board approved back in the fall or winter of 2016. This is the general fund. As you can see, total revenues in the aggregate amounted to $15.2 million. Total expenditures were $15.1 million. And you had an excess of revenues over expenditures of $73,000. You factor in some transfers out to other funds, and you end the year with a net change in fund balance. You see the bracketed $47,000 or so. And that represents prior year encumbrances or purchases on order that automatically roll and amend the current year budget. The final budget during the year, there are certain modifications made to the original budget. For the general fund, the town did amend the budget to accept the federal grant. That was also increased on the expenditure side. And the town also amended the budget roughly about $167,000 or so to cover some expenditures. The third column is your actual results for the year. As you can see, your actual results came in at $15.1 million on the revenue side compared to your final budget of $15.3 million, representing a negative variance, if you will, of $200,000 on the revenue side. When you look at the expenditures, on the other hand, your expenditures came in at $15.2 million as compared to your final budget of $15.4 million, representing a favorable variance of about $178,000. You continue down, you take your revenues less your expenses, you have expenditures that exceeded revenues by $109,000. You factor in some what we call other financing sources and uses. In 2017, the town did sell a piece of property, the Rockland Psychiatric Center, for $7.5 million. That was a non-budgeted item. You continue down, there's certain transfers out to funds. You come down to that net change in fund balance, the $7.2 million. That means that the general fund's revenues exceeded expenditures by the $7.2 million. So if you stick to that third line from the bottom, that net change in fund balance, you originally anticipated using $47,000 of your own funds to balance the budget. You amended that upward to $215,000. As you can see, your actual results came in at $7.2 million. So from that swing from anticipating using $215,000 to actually generating $7.2 million in income, mostly due to the sale of property, you can see all the way to the right, you have a budgetary surplus of $7.4 million. Again, if you take that sale of property out of the equation, then you're almost at break even. You actually have a little bit of loss there, about $230,000 or so. So you take the $7.2 million earnings for the year, add it to your opening fund balance of $4.7 million, and you end the year at just under $12 million. If you turn to page 6 and you look at the 2017 column, we've prepared a 5-year comparison, but just to continue, if you look at the bottom, $11.98 million is what we just discussed on the previous page.
Second column in from the left.
Yeah, second column in from the left, and you can see, I'm going to start actually from the 2013 column. You can see that your fund balance was, in the aggregate, was $7.9 million, and if you look one line up, your unassigned fund balance was $2.4 million, and if you go way to the top, you see in the non-spendable bucket, if you will, there was $5.2 million set aside for advances to cover some deficits of the 2 golf course funds. You go to 2014, and you're at your fund balance in the aggregate is actually up about $600,000 or $700,000. Again, your unassigned fund balance is up slightly, about $75,000. But the increase in the total fund balance is in that non-spendable piece where the advances to the golf course funds actually went up an additional $600,000. If we go to 2015, your total fund balance drops to $4.1 million. In 2015, the town determined that the golf course funds would not be able to pay those balances, so a transfer was made over to cover those balances. A receivable was set up, an allowance was taken, so the general fund kind of took a hit for that, but that money was set aside already, so it had no effect on the unassigned fund balance. If you go to the next column in 2016, you can see that your fund balance in the aggregate is up about $600,000, and that's good news because it's all in the unassigned category as compared to 2015. And then we fast forward to the current year, and you can see that your fund balance is up about $7.2 million or so, and that's mostly due to the sale of that piece of property. Now, all of that money did not fall to the unassigned because there was some debt associated with the property. So that money was set aside in that area called restricted for debt service. So there was about $3.6 million of bonds outstanding on that property, which was subsequently paid. So that was paid in 2018. We set the money aside so it would have no effect on your unassigned fund balance once that's paid off. We like to compare the unassigned fund balance to your 2018 adopted budget, and you can see at the bottom there, $7.2 million is compared to $14 million. Your fund balance is over 50%, which is extremely healthy.
And of course, there's a chart on page 7, and if we go to page 8, what we did is we just highlighted some of the revenue items and the detail which caused some of the changes within the revenue forecast. And there's a description, of course, below. And of course, the other financing sources was the main source of that generated the fund balance, the sale of the property. All other things being equal, the general fund was pretty much in balance, give or take $100,000 throughout 2017 on the revenue side, and of course on the appropriation side. Page 9 has a 5-year history of some of those major revenues, and you could see that in 2017 there was a new budgeted item for payments in lieu of taxes in the general fund, the townwide fund, of $1.9 million. That was a necessary revenue to keep the budget balanced. Rob, do you recall the reason that money was budgeted?
There was money set aside for judgments and claims for tax certiorari.
I believe there was tax certiorari, and I believe that was the first year that the towns were required to pay the community college tuition to the reimbursement to the county.
Yeah.
Right, and that was about $400,000 or $500,000.
Well, that's how it's mainly the IRG. IRG purchased the Pfizer property. They switched over from being Pfizer was a taxpayer on assessed value, and that converted over to a pilot instead.
Right.
So that's what the vast majority of that is.
But that's where the money went. Basically, without that money, you would have to find other sources of funds. On page 10, of course, is the appropriations, the expenditures, and again, you can see that on a $4 million budget, you pretty much came in at 15.3, underspending the budget by a couple of $100,000. So, you know, what this tells you on the revenue side and on the appropriation side is that the budget is fairly put together, and the management of the budget, of course, is there because you didn't overspend it on the appropriation side of the budget. I guess it's appropriate, I think, to skip, Rob, to where? You want to
Page
skip?
12?
Page 12?
12 or 13. Page 12 is the Town Outside Villages Fund, and here is this can be found on page 81 of the Spiral book, or the basic financial statements. And this is a snapshot of your balance sheet for the Town Outside Villages Fund. There are two components, police and other. We look at the middle of the page, your total assets are up about $400,000 or so, mainly in the area of your cash and equivalents. Those are up about $160,000, and certain receivables are up about $150,000. But the main charge in this account is the accrued liabilities line. In the middle of the page, you can see that that went from about $195,000 to well over $1 million. And the town did settle the police contract and was required to accrue some retro pay. And included in that $1 million is some amounts for 2016 retro pay and 2017 retro pay. And I believe that contract was settled to, I believe, 2022, if I'm correct.
Right, okay.
So if you turn to page 13, page 13 is again, the fund balance of the combined police and other Town Outside Villages Fund. Again, if you look at the 2017 column, you can see as you compare it to 2016, total fund balance is actually down about $700,000, and that's due to the contract settlement. You can see the unassigned piece went from a little over $2 million down to about $1.5 million, and the town is utilizing $500,000 to be used to balance the current budget year in the 2018 budget. But we're going to talk about the police and then the other component in a later slide. Page 14 is just to give you, it was a chart to show you the assigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. As you can see, as the fund balance, the assigned fund balance fluctuates, you can see that from 2013, those percentages range from 6% down to 4%, and then back up to 5% in 2017.
Not to confuse you, but you'll see that in this fund, you have three components of fund balance. Non-spendable, which of course is prepaid insurance, prepaid pension bill, or retirement bill, and perhaps encumbrances. You have, the encumbrances are in the assigned. You have restricted monies taking in from parties such as 911 or law enforcement that are restricted for that purpose within the fund. And you have the assigned, which is the encumbrances, the purchases from the prior year. You have public safety, and you have home community services. That's where those purchases existed. And then, of course, subsequent years' expenses is the $500,000, the monies that you appropriated to balance the 2018 budget. But the remaining funds are called assigned because they must stay within this fund. You notice that in the town-wide fund, there was an amount called unassigned, meaning that it's not spoken for any purpose. And the definitions for these categories can be found in the footnotes on page 41 when you get an opportunity to read that. Rob?
Okay, so if you turn to page 15, we broke out the police fund and the other fund in a later slide, but here you can see budget to actual revenues and expenses. And again, same setup. You can see in the original budget for the police Town Outside, the revenue side is mostly made up of real property taxes, and your expenses are your general support, your public safety, and your employee benefits. Again, in the original budget, if you take the total revenues of $23.6 million, subtract the expenses of $24.4 million, you come to an excess or a shortfall in this case of the bracketed $765,000. $65,311 are prior year encumbrances that automatically roll and amend this budget, and the town utilized $700,000 from 2016 to balance the 2017 budget.
So from fund balance, you withdrew from your treasury $700,000 to keep that adopted budget in balance when the budget was adopted.
If you look at the middle column, not much change from the original budget to the final budget. You did amend the budget at the bottom there for about another $45,000 or so to use of your own fund balance. The third column is your actual results, and you can see your actual revenues came in at $23.9 million compared to your final budget of $23.7 million, a favorable variance on the revenue side of the budget. And again, that was mostly made up of increase in police fees, such as false security alarms fees. You come to the expenditure side, you can see the expenditures amounted to $25.2 million as compared to your final budget of $24.5 million, representing a negative variance of almost $700,000. And again, some of that money was to account for, in the general government support, for transfers to the risk retention fund to cover some general liability cases. But the bulk of it is under public safety to account for the retro accruals on the recently settled police contract. Again, you take your actual revenue, subtract your expenses, you come down to a shortfall. So your expenditures exceeded revenues by $1.3 million. You subtract that from your opening fund balance of $2.2 million, and you end the year at $975,000. However, it's important to note, of the $975,000, you're utilizing $500,000 to balance the current budget you're in. 2018. So if you subtract that $500,000, you're left with about $475,000. And that doesn't take into account this recently settled contract that will impact 2018 because it was settled obviously after the budget was adopted. So there's some retro pay that will be incurred in 18. So we caution you to kind of look at this and keep an eye on it. I know that Jeff had mentioned to us that some of the departmental income is coming in exceeding the budget, so such as permit fees and things like that, drastically exceeding the budget. So you may have some excess revenue that'll fall to the bottom line that could cover these retro pays. Page 16 is the Town Outside Villages Other Fund. Same kind of setup in this fund. About 50% is made up of real property taxes on the revenue side, and maybe 40 or 45% is made up of departmental income, building permits, zoning fees. And you can see there, again, I'm not going to go through all of the components, but all the way to the right, your revenues exceeded the final budget by $688,000. Once again, due to those building permit and planning board fees that came in above your final budget by over $500,000. The expenditure side was pretty much right on budget. You take your revenue, subtract your expenses, and you had revenues, in this case, that exceeded expenditures by $626,000, so you're able to add that to your opening fund balance, and you end the year just a little over $2.1 million in fund balance.
So even though the police fund had a budget deficiency, as a result of this having a positive variance, the fund itself pretty much broke even on the positive
Right,
side.
when you combine.
Right.
Page 17 and 18 are just some 5-year major revenues that we kind of put in. You could take a look at how certain real property taxes and how these departmental fees, how the swings occurred from 2013 to 2017. Just to note that the town has remained within the 2% tax cap since its inception in 2000. Really affected the town in 2012. We're showing a 5-year comparison, but the town has been within that 2% tax cap from 2012.
Page 19.
Yeah, page 19, again, just some of the other funds. The town operates a sewer fund. That's found on page 93 to 95. That ended the year with expenditures that exceeded revenues by $136,000. So that ending fund balance amounted to $1.8 million. And again, that's assigned for sewer purposes. The town did plan on the use of $200,000 of its own fund balance in 2017. So although expenditures exceeded revenues that was planned for, the town is utilizing $200,000 of the 2017 fund balance to balance the 2018 budget. Highway fund, there's a part town and town-wide. That's found on page 96 through 101 in the comprehensive annual financial report. That ended the year with expenditures that exceeded revenues by $72,000. However, that ending fund balance is just under $1.9 million. Debt service fund, pages 102 to 104, had expenditures that exceeded revenues by $858,000, which was planned by the town as they had designated $800,000 in the prior year to balance the 2017 year. And that ending fund balance is at $2.2 million, and that's solely restricted to pay down debt. And the town also operates a capital projects fund found on pages 105 to 108. The town has approximately 18 active projects, and that fund balance is roughly $1.4 million, and no bonds were issued in 2017. Page 20 and 21, or actually 20 to 24, we talk about the enterprise or proprietary funds, the two golf course funds. Just spend a minute on Blue Hill. Again, page 20 is a snapshot of the balance sheet as of December 31st, 2017. The details can be found on page 121 of the basic financial statements. Middle of the page, you can see that the total assets dipped a little bit, about $150,000 or so, and that was really due to the current year depreciation on its capital assets. Current liabilities actually went down as well, and that was some repayments of due to other funds. And the long-term liabilities also went down, and that was due to two pieces. The town did repay the general fund $250,000 of that $6 million loan that it's outstanding. If you recall, in 2015, the town issued a board resolution saying that they would pay down to $6 million over 30 years at a minimum of $200,000 a year, or if they had excess funds, they would do so, and the town did a little bit more than was needed. And the balance was some pay downs of, like I said, due to other funds. The net position at the bottom, the aggregate net position is $550,000, but it's made up of two pieces. You have your net investment in capital assets, which is really your brick and mortar, and you have your unrestricted, which is a deficit. If you look to the right, there's certain trends that we do. A current ratio trend, which takes your current assets divided by your current liabilities. So you want that to be higher than 1. So right now, your current assets really equal your current liabilities. So you're right there at the 1-to-1, so to speak, but an improvement from 2016. And if you look at the unrestricted fund balance, we say that it's a negative $3.3 million, but that includes some of the long-term payables, such as the loans to the golf courses and the other post-employment. When you add that back, the long-term piece, your net position, your adjusted net position is about $330,000. If you turn to page 21, you can see that these are the operating revenues of the Blue Hill Golf Course. The revenues pretty much stayed even. Actually, green fees were down about $100,000 or so. However, your expenses were also down about $140,000 or so. The Blue Hill Golf Course generated income of $203,000 before certain interest income and interest expense. So the income, when you take those into account, the income before transfers was about $177,000. The debt service fund did transfer some funds, about $103,000, to cover certain principal and interest. So the Blue Hill Golf Course ended the year with earnings, if you will, of $280,000. Broad Acres, same thing, a snapshot of the balance sheet. You can see total assets actually consistent with the prior year. They're up slightly. However, your liabilities, your total liabilities are down about $200,000, and that's just the pay down of the bonds payable. Your net position, again, broken down into two components. You have your net investment in capital assets, and you have your unrestricted of $2.6 million. Again, if you look to the right, your current ratio is your current assets over your current liabilities, and you can see that your current assets are only $134,000. However, your current liabilities are about $365,000. So that current ratio has been declining from 2016. The adjusted net position, when we add back the long-term portions of your unrestricted fund balance, you're still at a bracketed number, so that's something that, we spoke to Jeff about to monitor that. We don't want to increase that loan again. So if this becomes an excessive number, then we'll have to revisit that loan to the general fund. Page 23 is quickly the revenues and expenses of the Broad Acres Golf Course Fund. You can see operating revenues are actually up about $50,000. You did have some other income in the current year. I believe you were paid some, I believe $75,000 was paid by Chase Bank for an access road that was put in through the golf course. They paid a portion of that. Your operating expenses are actually down as compared to the prior year. However, the the Broad Acres Golf Course did have a loss of about $44,000 before we factor in interest expense and transfers. When the town did transfer monies from the general fund, about $121,000 and $189,000 from the debt service fund. With that, the result is about just under $200,000 of income for the Broad Acres Golf Course Fund.
So the town board knows, when we paid off the fees, the bond for the RPC, a lot of that is attached to Broad Acres, so all that interest expense will be going away in 2018.
Then on page 24, the town does operate two internal service funds, one for workers' compensation and one for risk retention. Again, page 24 is the balance sheet as of December 31st, 2017. The details can be found on page 131 of the basic financial statements. Again, your total assets are down as some of the due from other funds was paid down. Your liabilities are also actually down. In particular, we look at your claims payable, your incurred but not reported claims. Although at the bottom you see that your unrestricted net position is a negative $1.6 million. That's okay because you have certain claims payable that we consider non-current or long-term. You've covered your current portion, so really that unrestricted number mirrors the long-term portion of the claims, which will be satisfied down the road in future years. If you turn to page 25, though, I'm going to jump to the middle of the page. You can see under employee benefits, workers' comp claims are trending downwards. You can see that actual claims went from almost in half, $2.7 million down to $1.3 million. And if you go to the top, the charges for services, all the operating funds contribute to this fund based on those claims. And you can see that's trending downward as well. As the claims go down, funding from those funds also goes down. Page 26 is the risk retention or your liability fund. Again, balance sheet on page 26. Details can be found on page 134 of the basic financial statements. Once again, your total assets are on par with 2016. Your current liabilities are actually down. And again, once again, your unrestricted net position is a negative $358,000, which really represents the long-term portion, three numbers from that line, which will be paid down the road. So you've covered your current liabilities, and these items will happen further down the road.
Yeah, that's good. I'll take them through.
Yeah.
We can just refer to the spiral book now. I just want to just briefly take you through the footnotes. I would jump to page 34. So what we've been discussing is the fund financial statements, and there's a description of the fund financial statements, and of course all the fund category, the general fund, the special revenue fund, the town outside villages fund, the sewer fund, and the highway fund, all on pages 34 and 35. There's a description of each of those. Just going to take you through some of the highlights. On page 41, remember I said that the descriptions of the fund balance, the definitions appear for each of those 5 categories: the non-spendable, the restricted fund balance, the committed fund balance, the assigned fund balance, and the unassigned fund balance. On page 45, we highlighted in the footnotes some of the fund deficits that exist within the funds. Rob initially spoke to you about the internal service fund, the workers' compensation benefits, and the risk retention. Those are on full accrual. Those represent claims payable that will be paid into the future. It's commonplace to run a deficit in those funds. You're not going to advance tax and fund for claims that aren't going to be paid until sometime in the future. So you're on a pay-as-you-go basis as those funds, those claims come in. The enterprise funds, Blue Hill Golf Course and Broadacres, of course, you have a repayment plan to the general fund for those deficits that have occurred in those funds also. Footnote D, the excess in actual expenditures, you can see the detail. Quite a bit of the overage came in the public safety area in the police department. What we try to do is try to encourage budget transfers before year end, when you know that overtime may be running high. Try to find other sources in the budget in order to transfer funds in. In the case of the police fund, it's a separate fund. The only place you really could go to is your fund balance, which obviously is not a good idea to catch you by surprise. But in any event, when you overspend the budget and there's not enough revenue, it's going to deplete your fund balance regardless. So that's just a brief description there. On page 49, there's some information on debt. There's a loan payable to the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation. At the end of 2017, there was still $1 million payable. And then below that, you have a chart on your long-term indebtedness. You can see that your bonds payable in the second column from the right, relative to government activities, was $60,728,000. You have performance contracts outstanding, energy performance of $1,194,000, and you have loans payable to the EFC of $1,484,000. If we turn the page, you have business type activities, which are enterprise funds, and I guess that's the housing authority?
The bottom is the component.
Yeah, the component.
No, those are the golf course
Yeah, and then the golf course,
Right.
and then you have the housing authority on the bottom. At the bottom of the page, on page 50, you have all the listings of all your bonds outstanding, the year they were issued, the original issue amount, the maturity date, and the interest rates, and the amount outstanding from there is, of course, that ties back into the two amounts from business type activities and government funds. So the amount of the principal outstanding is 63.8. I mentioned to you earlier energy performance contracts, loans payable to EFC, and of course the loans payable on the other funds. There's a description of each one of those liabilities. At the top of page 52 is a 5-year amortization of all your debt service, how much you're going to be required to budget for principal and interest in the governmental funds, and even for some of your performance contracts, your energy performance contracts. So you have a 5-year listing there, and then it's aggregated on the basis of 5 years at a time in the bottom half of that chart. On page 54, you have the employee retirement system descriptions and the police and fire retirement system, and you can see what the actuarial rates are. For every dollar you pay in salary for somebody in Tier 1 in the employee retirement system, you contribute almost 22 cents to the retirement system for that person. There's not many of those folks left, so you're mostly falling within Tiers 4 to 6, which average between 16% and 9.3. On the police side, you're probably mostly in Tier 2, I guess I would say, right?
Yeah.
And so you're contributing almost 26 cents for every dollar paid in salary to the pension system. And I think lastly, I would skip to page 60. Page 60, everybody hears about, quite often, about post-employment benefits, was the health insurance paid to retirees. The liability for that insurance is not recorded in the government funds because it's a future liability, but it is recorded in the government-wide financial statements because that's on a full accrual basis. But if you look and see how many employees are participating in the calculation, you'll see there's 240 active employees and 195 retired employees. If we look on the next page, you can see that the actual liability in the column all the way to the left, particularly for the governmental funds, is calculated at the beginning of 17 at $127 million. And the contributions you make during the year on behalf of those retirees and active employees is $3 million. So the amount accumulates. Currently, there is no provision by New York State to set up a trust fund like the pension system for you to contribute money toward that liability that someday has to be paid on behalf of your employees. Pages 66 and 67, in particular 66 has a listing of your pilot agreements. This is a required disclosure, and this is only for those pilot agreements that were initiated before December 31st, 2017. And at the top of page 67, you'll see that your finance director and you as the town board, you defease some bonds that happened subsequent to year end, so there's a disclosure on that as well. With that said, I don't know if you have any questions with respect to the financial statements or the footnotes. If you need time to look over this, we'd be happy to come back and answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Nick. Is there anyone on the board have any immediate questions for the folks presenting?
We've talked about this before. What's our position right now in overall fund balance as a town?
Well, certainly your town-wide
I know there's different parts to it, but put it all together.
Well, altogether, I think the town is in good financial health. You have very good ratables in this town, and your debt is not particularly high, and the town is well managed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for
I wouldn't have asked you that if I didn't know it was coming out with a good answer. No.
Don't ask the question if you don't know the
Town
answer.
board member, you knew the answer beforehand?
And then as if you look on page 64, the total fund balance is 23.2 million, up from 20.6 million at the end of last year.
So that's good.
And obviously, we got 7.5 million, and we paid off 3.5 million of that.
Keep up the good work, Jeff.
That's why I reappointed him. Any other questions or comments? No?
That's it.
All right, great. Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Nick, Rob, thank you very much.
If we have any other follow-ups, we'll send them over to you.
As I said, we're accessible. Rob and I are always accessible. I'm sure Dennis has my cell phone number. He calls it.
Run speed dial.
Great, thank you. I think Rob needs his microphone back, but other than that, we should be good. All right, the next thing we have in this workshop agenda, we're going to be workshopping a request for proposals for a community center design. And in order for the public to get a full picture of what we're looking to include in this community center and why and where, I want to put it together in a brief presentation to look at. So we've got it up on the screen here. This is the result of a substantial amount of work going into it on the part of our departments and both by the members of the board. So, you know, our town, here in Orangetown, we're about 20% parkland between the different jurisdictions and everything, but we do not have a community center for use by residents, for seniors, for youth, for anyone. Our neighboring towns all have multiple community centers. This has been identified by many people over years as a sort of a deficiency in terms of services for our folks here in town, recreational services. We got the space, we don't have the facilities. I went on a listening tour of all of our senior clubs this past spring after speaking with the board to get their input as to what they might want to see in a community center. And I also did outreach on social media and to members of the public and other means to get input into what go into an RFP for a design for this community center, which you'll see. The town board, members of the board, and I also sat down with our Parks and Rec director, Eric, who put in input as to what he thinks would make sense in such a facility, since in the end, he would be supervising the facility and running it and moving his offices to it, which we'll get to. And that was all sort of put together into one document, which is going to be issued sometime in September after we vote to approve it next week. The idea to pay for this, the intent is not to pay for it with a tax hike, because if you raise taxes to pay for services, then no one's here to actually use the services, they can't afford to live here. We have anticipated land sales that should be coming through in RPC, and by getting this process going now, because in the end, this RFP is just for the design, to give a proposal to do a design of a community center that can then be built, it allows us to sort of shave some time off the timeline. There's no reason to hold this process up in anticipation, because we could always hit pause if we need to. We just don't want to not get the engine started and end up wasting everyone's time. So these are the things that we're looking to include in this community center in terms of actual amenities for the community. This goes into the RFP, so when someone comes out with the design based on the RFP, they're going to have to try to meet these requirements. So it's going to be 2 floors. There'll be elevator access. The meeting rooms and the basketball courts will be on the first floor. To the basketball courts, there'll be 2 side-by-side with a composite floor, so they could be used for multiple activities, not just basketball. The idea is to have a scoreboard, collapsible bleachers, a walking or running track above it, because that portion would be 2 stories but open. There would be a separate gym with exercise equipment and locker rooms. There'd be multiple meeting rooms and classrooms. We've left it open for the designers when they come in as to how to meet the requirements of one large room with 150 plus and multiple smaller rooms for 30 to 40 people. That could be movable walls. It could be a combination of separate rooms and movable walls. But the key is that you at least would have to have 150 people at once in one big room, or several different smaller rooms. It may be a shared space where the walls come in and out, or it may be separate rooms, but that's up to the people responding to the RFP to figure out, because it's not our expertise. There'll be a full kitchen accessible to all of the meeting rooms, ceiling-mounted projectors and screens for meetings and events and activities in each of these rooms. There would be storage space for both town equipment, which would be larger, obviously, because we have all of our rec equipment, and we've been providing some sort of storage space, locker size, so, large lockers for the senior clubs in our community. We'll be budgeting for 10 of those to allow the senior clubs to store equipment on site. Right now, our senior clubs meet, those who aren't in them, obviously, in separate locations scattered throughout the town. The idea is to give them a place where they could use it in a town facility as well. There would be a stage for use by kids and adults alike, a computer technology lab, a game room. The restrooms would be accessible both inside and outside the building. There'd be a family restroom and infant changing stations in all 3 types of restrooms, male, female, and family. And the paved lighted parking lot, which would include handicapped or easily accessible spaces beyond that, which is required by law, simply because we know that there's going to be a lot of seniors using it at one given time. We want them to have easy access into the building without having to go from a long distance or from an odd pitch on the ground. In terms of office space, right now the Parks and Rec department, the bulk of it, other than the maintenance section at least, sits in a small old house, essentially, on Veterans. Now, I don't know the historical nature of the house, but I do know it's very old and it's very uncomfortable and it doesn't fit everything properly. So they will be moving into the 2nd floor of this building as their offices, and it does 2 things. One, it gives them more and better modern office space so they can have space for more of the part-time and seasonal employees who don't really have room to move around in their current space, but it also allows us to minimize the excess staffing needed to run this place, because there will be people on site pretty much all the time working there. The idea is that there would be expected to be 1 new hire along with the construction of this community center. There'll be an activities coordinator, and that position may be created by downsizing another excess vacant position in order to backfill it. It may be created and dealt with in the budget at that time in terms of just an additional position, but we don't have to cross that bridge until we literally have this thing built. So we're just planning on doing that in a revenue neutral fashion, whether through fees or through just shifting one position to that. And the building would have a key card swipe access system for both employees and users who want to use the facilities. In terms of location, what we were looking at after talking with Eric and with the community, we want to keep it centrally located so it's easily reachable by everyone in town from east to west. Obviously, if it's centrally located, it's more easily accessible to those in the center part of town, but it's a trade-off what you have to do. We're putting 1 in, not 5, so we can't put them in every hamlet. The spot we identified after a lot of looking is the area of the RPC territory that we still own that is to the east of the volunteer housing on Chief Bill Harris Way, formerly Blaisdell, and just south of Old Orangeburg Road, which is where the entrance would theoretically be. We're not looking to put a new curb cut on Orangeburg Road itself. A few reasons beyond just the central location. It's also right near all of our major park facilities. It's just down the street from the soccer fields. It's across the street from Veterans, which is our other major facility. So our Parks Department will still be centrally located, not just in the town, but to all the major assets they have to manage to do their job. Along with that, this is actually right next to 2 tennis courts that are in decent shape but have been abandoned by RPC. Those, as part of this project, will be reclaimed for use by residents. And again, they're right next to the community center as will be built and the offices, so there wouldn't need to be any sort of extra work done to supervise that space. We do have a few other companion projects that we're going to touch on but are not included in this existing RFP that we're going to be putting out. So like I said, we are going to be doing reclamation of those abandoned tennis courts. That's something they were talking about in the RFP, but it's not necessarily going to be, we haven't quite worked out whether it's going to be a component part or just to account for it when you do the design. We're looking to do a dog park. That space is not, again, the design of the dog park's not included. However, there is a reference in it to leave space to put in a dog park near the community center. So again, it can be supervised by our Parks and Rec department nearby. And a splash pad or a sprinkle park, you know, there's always talk of pool or no pool, but let's just kind of split the baby here and give a water recreational thing for our kids to use. There's a question as to whether in the end this would be near the community center or near the existing playgrounds on Veterans. Some of that will have to do with practical space needs and also then where you put the kids versus the animals. You don't necessarily want those two things interacting. So there's a good chance it'll end up on Veterans, but it's one of those companion projects we are looking at to go along with, but is not included in this current RFP. And in terms of a tentative timeline, today, August 7th, we're presenting the RFP in this presentation at the workshop meeting. The intent is to vote to issue an RFP next week. The pre-bid meeting, as currently in the RFP, would be September 12th, with responses due on October 24th. The rest is all approximate because it's not happened yet, but we would then evaluate the responses to get the full RFP, the full design done, which theoretically would be done by approximately the end of January of 2019. And then we'd be able to issue a construction RFP by the end of February, maybe early March of 19. And then hopefully in early summer of 2019, we'll be able to actually start breaking ground on this project. In terms of the cash, if we're ahead of timeline and the cash hasn't hit yet, but we know it's coming because we're actually fully committed on a sale, we would then explore a bond, which would then be defeased with the cash, but it's going to be a revenue neutral thing. That's the timeline we're trying to stick to, but again, it's approximate, and we'll go from there. So we wanted to make sure we put this out so everyone can look through it, and there's a lot of decisions left to be made after the first step. That's all we'd be voting on to get through is the October 24th date, and the rest is going to be up to both the community and the board as to how and when and where this gets done. So moving on, unless anyone else has anything they want to add. Is there anything? No? Okay, great. We have a presentation, or we're going to talk a little bit about with Brian Kenny. One of the things we have to do is with the new New York State base proportional, you can step up, Brian, that allowed us to put the 1% band on the base proportion shifts between residential and commercial properties or homestead, non-homestead. We have to kind of opt into that. So Brian, can you just talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to pass, each year we do this, and we have to determine what percentage of the coming budget is going to be paid by homestead, residential properties, or the commercial. Orangetown, I understand, if I remember, I wasn't here then, adopted the homestead provision about 1982 during a revaluation. And usually the reason towns do that is to capture more taxes from condominiums, which the town has a lot of. By not doing that, you have to value condominiums as if they were apartments on an income basis, which minimizes the tax payments. So I think that's probably was one of the motivations the town did. In any case, we have kept that option all these years, and each year we have to determine what percent the homeowners will pay versus the commercial property owners. And that is based on equalization, and it's based on the overall market. That's why it's very important to allow my office and our consultant to challenge New York State each year, or to at least go over the figures with them on equalization, because this is one of the areas that it affects. And as you know, we were successful in this last year, where we had the equalization rate raised from, I think it was originally going to be 44%, we brought it up to 47.25%. This year it went down a little to 45.5, but even that would have gone down to 44 again this year if we hadn't challenged it. So I think the money is well spent. We're starting the process for next year already. But in any case, the calculations have been done, and I gave you a informative sheet to compare last year's proportions with the coming proportions for the town and town-wide. We also do this for school. There really isn't too much of a change in the school numbers, but for our purposes, Homestead for town-wide went up less than 1%, and the TOV went up 0.5%. Part of that reason that it's fairly stable, even though the overall market for homes went up a lot higher than that, probably 2 or 3%. But it minimizes the shift each year, these homestead calculations. One of the reasons that we were able to minimize the town outside was because of a new law that was just passed, which the town is going to opt into, I hope. In fact, you have to have a resolution at the next board meeting to do that, which limits a shift from the previous year base percentages, which is it's a two-step process. Anyway, we can opt into having a shift of no more than 1%, which will help the homeowners primarily in this case. So these calculations include that provision in the law that we haven't yet adopted, but we will, I'm assuming. And so if we hadn't adopted it, the town outside would have probably gone up about 3%, 3.5%. Instead, it's going up 0.5%. The town-wide number, we don't need to do anything with. It's going to be less than 1% anyway, so we don't have to use that arm of the law to help us with that particular classification. And the law does not include school districts at all, so the schools are calculated in the old-fashioned way, and whatever they are, they are. So that's basically it. So we just, and we do this every year, you just have to resolve these calculation numbers, and then what's new this year is adopting a resolution to opt into this new law that Ellen Jaffe and Carlucci sponsored, and we started this process a couple of years ago, but Chris was a big help in this too, and the town board. So hopefully we'll be able to keep a lid on, shifts that have happened in the past that are, punishable. I mean, really bad, that it's hard to explain. When the budget goes up 1%, but the shift to homes maybe go up 3%. How do you explain that? Well, we've had to do that in the past, and it's difficult. People get upset, and then they'll start saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have this. But that's another argument. I don't think we want to go there. So that's basically where we are. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But
Any questions? No?
Thank you.
Good, great, thank you,
Okay.
Brian.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, and then the next discussion item is, there may be nothing to discuss, but I did send something around. The Rockland County's draft shared services plan has been issued. All of the departments did meet and participate in this process in terms of what they're looking at, and there's nothing binding in it, but we basically have to sort of assent to it. Is there anyone who has reviewed it, has any things that they want to pull out of it? There's nothing particularly crazy in it, but.
I think it'll be interesting to see what actually takes place.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
doesn't.
because it's really just step one of the whole process, because it just sort of formally adopts a plan. It doesn't do it yet. And one of the big things we added was that sewer, to look at that, because that wasn't originally in it, but because of the situation we're dealing with, we wanted to look at it, which was good. Anything on from you guys on the left there? Any thoughts on this subject? Okay. And it's ongoing. I mean, it's not due at any immediate time, but we want to make sure we're talking about it if we need to. All right, so we did the first voting resolutions, and number 6 is our next voting resolution. We only have a couple of voting resolutions today because it's, after all, a workshop. We're going to accept the resignation of Eric O'Connell from DME effective August 4th, a few days ago. Is there a motion on that? From Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Divney, all in favor? Aye. Great. We did the commercial subdivisions 7 and 8. And now we're moving to 9. 9 we have to vote on because it happened already what happened, and we're amending a resolution we voted on last week. It accidentally said planning board instead of ACABOR. So is there a motion to amend resolution number 465 related to the craft beer week? Councilman Divney, second from Councilman Batari. All in favor? Aye. Great. Now we're moving on to our workshop items. Next week on the 14th, 8:05, we have a temporary storage container town code change. Public hearing open, and it's pods for, in the parlance, the brand that use it. Then we have continue or close. Then we have a declaration for SECRA, lead agency, and on the code for 12. And we're still going until page 9. Page number 13 is to a motion to adopt that local law, assuming we get there that day, which that is attached in the backup. Then we have placeholders for resolutions to set public hearing related to the usage of electric vehicle charging stations and fee schedule. I'll give a little background, then I'll turn over to Rob for the rest of the background. But basically, the funding from NYSERDA that you folks voted on last year for the LED lighting had excess in it and was able to be applied towards creation of electric vehicle charging stations, one bank in Pearl River by the train station and one bank in Spark Hill by the downtown. We are able to charge for the use, which we should, because in the end it's our electricity, and we don't have any provision in the town code to do that. So we have to, as they're getting ready to build them, adopt the changes to the law to allow us to do that. Rob, do you have anything you want to add on the subject?
No, I sent you something a little earlier. I did speak to NYPA. They were helpful in giving various options in terms of how we want to handle it. We can charge, obviously, for when somebody wants to use the apparatus, they have to, there's either by kilowatt hour, which is one method that some municipalities use. Some have used just for the spot, but that may not make sense. Probably what I'll end up proposing, subject to input from the town board, is a combination of paying for the spot as well as use by kilowatt hour. So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of those.
Yeah, and maybe I wasn't clear. This is for use by the public. This isn't an internal thing. This would you'd be able to charge your electric vehicle if you have one. Does anyone have any thoughts for Rob on the fee structure, what they think makes sense? If you've thought about it, obviously we can get more feedback as he writes it, but no.
No.
Okay.
I mean, we'd have to find out is there a precedent anywhere else?
There is. There's a lot of, he got a lot of background docs from neighboring municipalities, yeah.
It's kind of difficult because they're
all different.
It's a little bit of apples and oranges comparisons for some, but there's a lot of these at Metro North stations. So we just got the data, and we'll send it around. But as I said, I think it probably makes sense
to share that through, and then by the time we have it for before next week,
to do a combination with the kilowatt hour and the space.
Okay. Anything else on that, guys? No? All right, great. We're going to have a resolution next week to appoint a member of ACABOR to fill the unexpired term of Brian Terry. Does anyone have any commentary on that appointment? Mr. McCullough is currently on our Sanitation Commission and had expressed interest in ACABOR. I think anyone remembers him from the interviews. Okay. Resolution to appoint Aranda Lintz as member of the OPDEC to fill an expired term. Any commentary on that or questions? Or no? Okay. Then we have to set a 2019 preliminary budget at 8 p.m. to publish the meeting for that. Then we have to approve, so this is an adopt a spot. We did adopt a spot, it was a month or so ago, I think, for Bronsdorf Park. We actually got permission from Metro North to finally let someone fix that train station building that kind of is a bit of an eyesore over there. And we got a company that will do the labor for free. They may send us the cost of supplies, which we limited to less than $1,000 for the actual, it's just the sort of the gateway to Pearl River. And they're going to do the same adopt a spot agreement, even though technically it's not our property. We've been given permission to use it, which will be good to spruce that up a bit. Then Brown and Weinraub is our lobbyist. They are due for renewal of their contract. I personally think they did a great job. They got everything we needed done. That bill that allowed us to do the base proportion would not have gotten done without them. Frankly, it was, especially with what happened with the leadership of the IDC changing and everything. So, it's up to everyone else, but I think it's $4,000 well spent per year. Mobile parking payment service for 21. This is what was talked about by Captain Butterworth. Effectively, this allows us to do this service, have mobile payment options for downtown Pearl River without paying anything for hardware or raising the rates. So you can still pay 25 cents per hour as the meter. If you want to pay by a credit card, you simply download the app, and then they charge a service fee on top of the 25 cents. But since it's an option, you could always just break a dollar and put in quarters. The rate doesn't change. It's no cost to the town. They even provide stickers and signage and software for our enforcement agents. The PD went through it and thought it worked out well, so we'll have to vote on that. Then the RFP we discussed for the community center. Then accepting resignations for the traffic advisory committee for two individuals that are retired. Then we have to figure out who to appoint for the traffic advisory chairperson to fill the unexpired term. Speaking with the members of the traffic advisory board, no one who's currently on it really wants to be appointed chair, probably because it's a little more work and people get angry at you. But I don't know if anyone has anyone in mind or anyone that they could reach out to, but I'm kind of not really sure who to put in there, to be perfectly honest, but we have a week to figure that out.
Joe T, you just raised your hand?
I didn't see it, but now you mention it, Tommy may have. All right, we'll put him as a backup.
Joe T.
It's a very prestigious job, Joe. And then you get to be on a stage again, because now that you won't have to do this anymore. Okay, give it some thought if you reach out to some people. I don't think Joe really wants it, so, but we do need someone.
Nominate me.
Oh, well, let's get it done. We can do a voting resolution if you want. All right. And then we have to appoint someone as the clerk. That's always an employee who we can probably do someone in my office if we want, but someone to handle the traffic advisory board or someone in finance, I guess. Jeff, I don't know if you have, no? We got a head shake from Jeff on his finance employees. If you know anyone who wants to do that job as a clerk, who's an employee, that way we don't have to volunteer anyone, and it'll be okay. Can you clerk and chair? Is that allowed? All right, then we have accepting different applications and agreements and documents for the clerk's office. Then we have a settlement for Margaret Walsh. We've workshopped this a couple times. The dollar amount is left blank because they're currently negotiating a final plus or minus $10K on a $50,000 to $70,000 settlement. So we'll figure that out by next week. Then on building, we have on the agenda the olfactometers. They're called nasal rangers, which is pretty cool sound, but they're just olfactometers. The exact price, I don't know if we have it, but Jane, you want us to jump up to the podium because there was something else you wanted to talk to about the contract for the consulting services as well. Yeah,
I had
sure.
forwarded,
I think it just didn't make it on the agenda.
Yeah, it just didn't make
it. It was a little late, yeah.
okay, so the olfactometers are an interesting looking piece of equipment, to say the least. It looks like a giant nose. So it's quite funny looking.
I hope that's on camera for everyone at home. That's cute.
That is literally a snout. And what it does is it collects the odors and it dilutes it. So it's a basic process of what we actually had TRC do within the lab. There are 2 kits that come with training and a third olfactometer piece, so we can have 3 different inspectors. Each one would have their own. 2 in the building department, and I believe we talked about having the junior health engineer have the 3rd one. So the total for training for 3, which is done online, so there's no travel expense, and the equipment is $6,375. And that includes some accessories that come with. I did forward this. I can send it again, as well as the brochure. And it comes right from the company that manufactures it. You buy direct.
Yeah. It's in the backup, yeah.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And any questions on the nasal field rangers? nasalrangerfields.com.
No, the whole package.
Equipment
and
and
the
training.
accessories.
So it's
I can give this to you if you want it.
two olfactometers, 3 being trained on them. Is that what it is? And there's
Right,
like a
so
nose piece for them to not
The
have to share
nasal
that.
ranger mask package, which is the third item down, is like a second set of what each inspector would wear, so they're not sharing them.
So
there'll be 3
it's
of
not like
them.
a computerized part. It's like an extra mouth guard part. basically.
Right, so
Gotcha.
much like an EMT is not sharing the face mask.
Right, but they are sharing the machinery. Yeah, I got it.
Right, so you have the 2 full kits, and then you go down to the third line item, nasal ranger mask package, which also has the training access code. So 3 inspectors can be trained in total.
Okay, got it. And then the next thing is the mechanical engineering services, which the responses came back a few days ago. If you could take us through that real quick, Jen.
Okay, yeah, so the responses came in on Friday at 11. We had 2 RFPs, proposals submitted based on our RFP. If you recall back, this was actually an appeal by myself to the ZBA on behalf of the department because they were in violation of the performance standards. So we made an appeal to the ZBA to put them in violation and start the wheels moving forward, because the ZBA has a provision within the performance standards that allows them to obtain engineering consultants at the applicant's expense. So because they did not conform to their approval from 2017, we moved forward with that action. Then I came to the board to ask that the board approve the preparation of the RFP, which we did. We submitted it, and we received our proposals. So at this time, the best course of action would be to have the zoning board review those RFPs and then because right now the public meeting is open on that hearing from March, because they continued it so that we could do, the RFP. They wanted us to come to them with firm numbers before they would make that decision. So we've done that. So now their public meeting is still open. So the course of action that we talked about today is let the ZBA review the RFPs, close the public portion, and that's the only action they'll be making. They're not reviewing any engineering. They're not reviewing any remedies at this point. It's just acceptance of the RFP and making recommendation to the town board as to who the ZBA would like to see hired. And then the ZBA would make that to the town board. The town board then moves forward with accepting the RFP and executing it.
Okay, and this will be, their meeting is what day again?
The meeting is on September 5th. It's the first Wednesday. We can add them to that agenda because they are a continued item. The abutting neighbor notices will be sent out, which is required. The public is, again, they're permitted to come and speak, but we want to make it clear that it's really only about the selection of the engineer, not the solutions at this point, because no one's had an option to review anything.
Okay. All right, so we're not going to be doing this then next week. We won't be awarding the contract next week as it is being workshopped here on the agenda. It'll be pulled out. We'll wait until the September meeting to then
Correct,
issue
which
an
I
RFP.
believe the town board meeting happens the week after?
We
Not
have a
recall.
workshop meeting on the day after Labor Day.
Okay.
And which you said that theirs is on the 4th or the 5th?
Theirs is on the 5th.
Okay,
Theirs
so
is
their
on
meeting is
Wednesday.
after our workshop, but we could still do it at the next town board meeting, which is on the 25th, I think. So,
Correct, we
yeah.
could have it ready.
Right, okay. Any
As
questions?
long as they make a decision that night. If they
Right,
don't move to vote
They would
for
have to
some
make a
reason.
decision on the RFP.
Right, but the ZBA clerk prepared the packages today, so.
So they'll have it well in advance.
They'll
to be
have the
able
2
to-
proposals well in advance,
Okay.
correct.
Any questions? All right, great. Thank you, Jen.
Okay.
All right, moving on to police. As discussed, we have a temporary appointment to police officer for a gentleman, John Gernon, who is going to be going to the academy based on the funding we were going to be receiving for the SRO agreements. And then we have 2 police officers being sent, and in the agenda, it may say in front of you detectives, but it's police officers being sent for SRO training, school resource officer training in advance of the coming school year. 1 for Pearl River, 1 for South Orangetown. Then we have proposed use of town roadways for Bike MS 2018, Sunday, October 21st. Then the next ones, I don't, if anyone has any questions, Jim is here, but I don't want to make you get up unnecessarily, but there are 2 truck bids that are being issued. These are bonded for, so they're just being issued for actual purchase at this point for plow trucks. Any questions on that for Jim? Okay. Jim, do you have anything you wanted to bring up or beyond that?
No, this is part of our bond
Yeah.
equipment purchases.
Okay.
There's 2 wing trucks, they have additional wings on the side, front plow, side plow, and one is another resolution, the one that does not have a side plow.
Okay, and just for those at home, that's 2 of the trucks have the side wings, the extended stuff, and the other one does not. So it's just a regular plow truck. Got it. All right, then we have approving the expenditure of monies that were bonded for the highway improvements and service treatment program. And then we have the approve and lend assistance for the Pearl River High School pep rally and bonfire Friday, September 28th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then we have the Orangeburg Fire Department's annual Halloween parade for assistance. That's October 31st from 5:30 to 8:30. And then the One Love Culture Festival is having an event, and I'm not sure what that is still, but basically all they're doing is using the showmobile at the Masonic Field.
That one doesn't have, they got to pay rent, but the other ones does, that one doesn't. That should have
To pay for the showmobile, you're right, it does,
$400.
it does not say that, you're right. Yeah. Eric, is there anything you have on that, or Jim, it's highway/parks?
We're just working through the group run to get some of the details at this point as far as
Are they a non-for-profit or something? Does anybody know who they are or what they do? or-
They came to me kind of late. They had already had everything else pretty much approved by department. It was already on the agenda. Late last week, they contacted me. They realized they didn't ask for the showmobile, so we had it added to the agenda kind of late. They have the folder paperwork with their department.
I didn't see, was it back?
Because I thought we only listed out.
Yeah, is there a normal fee associated? I thought it's like $400,
We
right?
only want certain people.
Yeah, the fee should be in there.
Yeah.
The question is.
What it's for.
Do they fit into what?
Do you-
Criteria that you can use the showmobile.
Yeah.
I'd like
All
to
right,
know that.
can we do some research on this before next week and find out what they're doing exactly, before we, who they are, before we give them our town logo emblazoned vehicle for $400? And also we'll change it to, for the fee, there'll be a fee. I don't know what type of One Love they're promoting, but we want it to be the appropriate type. Eric, you can check into that if you don't mind. Or whoever's, is that a clerk, does the clerk have the permit? Is there some? Okay. We'll figure out where it is before next week. And then we have a lend assistance for another event. This is being run by Kim in my office as a fundraiser for some charities in honor of her son who passed last year. Yes. Oh, the event's happening. Why is it a proposed resolution?
I have the event right.
Okay. So I guess it should have been a voting resolution then, if it's this coming Saturday.
Art exhibits,
Art exhibits and stuff?
food, music, culture, love.
I mean, going forward, if you don't have it in on time, we're not going
Yeah.
to give it to you. So that,
That's the thing.
Tom, we've done it.
We have done it late before, yeah.
Organizations that we know, you know.
Right.
well, here's the deal.
It's in the package. Significant gap
Where is it?
meetings at the time you didn't get an application in.
Right, if there's a gap, I get that, yeah, I mean, it does happen.
But Dennis, we've never done it. We've never done it that quickly for the showmobile.
And with.
Unless it was for like the Nyack or something where we knew who it was.
Backup, there's very little in there.
I mean, we gotta
Jerry, could you
have
pass
some
it?
type of policy. You can't just come in like the week of and say, we want the showmobile.
You would know. This doesn't tell you.
No, this is just their application. The date of application is, just so we know if it was their fault or not.
7/24.
7/24 they came. That's when it got to police notes. Before that, 7/9. They started the application process on July 9th.
Yeah, so it's a month.
It's not like they were running late on it.
All right.
All right. at a fee, given that they did it on July 9th and that no one, every department has signed off on it. Highway Department signed off, Parks and Rec signed off, Police signed off. So in terms of whether it's an acceptable thing, it's been blessed off on.
Well, here's the deal, they already got the permits, but
Right.
they're gonna get charged $400.
Right, exactly. So, since we have to vote on it, we can move this, but amend the content at a rate of $400. So upon the recommendations to use the showmobile on the German Masonic grounds at a rate of $400. Is this the last part of it? I'll move it. Is there a second? Yeah, so we have to vote. All right, Councilman Batari, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Jerry, for finding that in the background. All right, moving on. We already did 40. 41, assistance for the Orangeburg Fire Department's holiday parade on December 8th. 42 is the Sons of Italy for the showmobile at a rental cost of $400. It's in there for that one. Yeah, it's in there for the others, yeah. So we're good on the others with the fee. And then again for the Nyack Recreation Department on Saturday, September 15th, for the Great Nyack Get-Together.
Well, how you gonna do it? There's 13th to 16th and then the 15th. How you doing the showmobile both?
We have two showmobiles.
New one that we bought this year with the bridge fund, but we still have to auction our old one off.
Who's getting the good one? Sons of Italy, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yes, they're both in very good shape.
They're both good ones, but the newer one. Yeah, okay. Well, so they'll get it first, so they'll get the newer one. 44, there's going to be a donation of a memorial bench in memory of Mickey Reeves on the rail trail. 45, resolution to award contract for playground equipment replacement at Cherrybrook Park, Spark Hill Park, and Stoughton Park. Eric, you're still working out a couple of the decimal points on that one. But we will have it ready in time to vote. And this was partially grant, partially bonding funded already. Then personnel, we have a motion to accept the resignation of Paulie Indemi. That'll be effective in an out month. And then a resolution to appoint Dylan Hofstas as our junior public health engineer effective September 17th, which is when he is available. Then the stuff that Brian was talking about with the resolutions for base proportions. So the first one is for the actual acceptance of the base proportions, and the next one, 49.
Well, going back to 46,
Yeah.
right? The resignation's effective June 1st, 2019?
This was part of a negotiated settlement to get out of the process we were engaged in,
All right.
the disciplinary process that Teresa was working out. Is there anything that can be said about that that's not an executive session, Teresa? Okay. Okay, so we can talk about this for a few minutes after, but this is what's proposed right now, essentially. And then again, 49, that's to opt into the law that was just passed that Brian mentioned earlier. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to bring up for the workshop? Okay, so we do have an adjournment in honor of Eugene Tomaselli of Pearl River. He was an attorney, he was a World War II veteran, very established member of the community, and he will be missed by many in the community. So I move that we enter executive session, discuss matters of personnel, then immediate thereafter adjourn in memory of Eugene Tomaselli. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Divney, all in favor? Aye. All right, great. Thank you all very much. Yeah, push back there.